Speaking of good old-fashioned Tesla, though, are you guys seeing perhaps something maybe above 713?
I've seen
Maybe
stability in
There's
the whole EV sector, industry, whatever term you want to use. Whether it be parts, EV part suppliers, EV companies, I've seen some stability. After a really rough stretch in February, seen a lot of stability. And when from a technical analysis, from an old trader standpoint, when you see stability, you start to think, all right, what's the next leg up? Not necessarily what's the next leg down. And took some really big shots. The whole EV did, Tesla included. There's been some stability forming now.
Well, you gotta like the stability, but in the stability, Mark, you also, a couple key points to kind of look at technically is you look at these horizontal resistance levels here, but you look at these increasing support levels as you threaten that breakout. And as long as these support levels continually to increase, you then get consolidation here, and then you break out on top of the horizontal at 712. You got the downward moving 50 at 719. Obviously, that's going to come down a little bit as you fight here for Tesla. As long as this 20 holds, I think you're lining up a good breakout here.
I agree. There's a trade there, in my opinion.
And for me, as long as the 20 holds, though, like I like the run from where it's at.
Yeah. So I'm thinking breakout 710, 711, 712, wherever that trigger actually is. And the 20's got to hold, and then higher price appreciation. I'm also looking at the ARK components here. It's not just Tesla. I mean, ARKK is reverting a little bit here. Similar pattern. Tesla's actually
I like Tesla better, though.
I agree with that as well. Square, second holding in ARK. I mean, I'm seeing some interesting performance in some of these companies. W pattern coming off of the consolidation here. Teladoc is
but what's the difference on Square versus Tesla?
Tesla has a better R to R after the confirmation, in my opinion.
Well, that's because of where Square's running at 200 all the way to 250 versus Tesla's running, and this is why I like Tesla and not Square. Square's probably running more aggressively right now, but Tesla, if it does break out, it's running from 660 to 665 into that breakout of 710, 720 versus what is Square's already ran a good 50 points into it. I just like the run. You're starting a cleaner run here from on Tesla.
I agree. And I think once you get confirmation, you can map out a better reward to risk. I shouldn't shorten that, make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. A reward to risk ratio based on a trading setup. But that's even just trading, and Tesla gets lumped into those great companies that Mark's talking about, and yeah, Mark, I did hear what you said as well. You did call Tesla a great company. We have tape on that. But I'm thinking also about Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, all of those types. And, Matt, I wouldn't mind taking a look at some of these charts. I mean, we've been highlighting that breakout on Microsoft for a couple weeks. It's performing like crazy over the last 2 weeks. Leadership, Apple's coming off the bottom. Can we take a look at some of these FANG stocks and maybe just give a quick technical read?
Well, I mean, you look at Microsoft here and you see the weakness, and Microsoft got caught up in that whole storyline. Nobody was talking about it. We had it on our report on the breakout. It's just something that we've seen over and over and over again. These minor moments in just losing favor with the marketplace, and then all of a sudden it breaks out of the right shoulder and just runs. We've seen it over and over and over again. And Microsoft now is looking at, breaking out of all-time highs. You're looking at a very euphoric condition right here where it's up, 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 doesn't even consolidate. And this is a sign of strength, guys. It's frustrating to traders, but it is a sign of strength. Whereas the traders like, well, give me another 2 days of consolidation. Let that 90 EMA catch up. Give me that clean high base. And Microsoft's like, I'm not going to wait for you guys. I'm not going to wait. That's a sign of strength. And so when you're looking at this on the daily chart, obviously Microsoft's overextended. When you look at it on the weekly chart, that is not the viewpoint you have on Microsoft. You're seeing a breakout of an all-time high. You're seeing a breakout of a 52-week high, and you have momentum behind it against the backdrop of 6 weeks of consolidation where nobody, and I mean nobody, was talking about Microsoft up until last week. And so you got a real good clean breakout on that weekly chart. And based on this weekly performance you're seeing on Microsoft, what's the most likely scenario here over the next up until this earnings? Got
I think
5 weeks.
based on that, I would say kind of upward drift and upward mobility.
Upward drift, right?
I don't
Upward
think it's going to
drift.
explode in
Okay.
front of earnings, but I think it's got upward mobility. Yeah.
And if it did explode in front of earnings based on the technicals, you would not be surprised.
It wouldn't shock me at all.
It would not surprise you.
Mhm.
Looking at Apple, Apple's been one of the laggards, in recent history, still showing a negative price year to date. But you're looking at this on a weekly chart, sticks the landing there at 120, multiple tests under 120, can't break it. That coincides with old resistance over here. And now you wake up. This is called confirmation, guys. That's what that's called. Whether or not you agree with that as a buy the dip candidate or not, that is confirmation. You're looking at confirming above the previous week's high. You're not confirming above the previous week's high. You're confirming above the previous 5-week high.
Mhm.
That's the consolidation you've had in Apple. So when you're looking at Apple here, you see a short-term bearish downtrend coming into old support levels, old resistance, new support at 120. The 200-day moving average slowly and methodically creeps its little line up to catch up with the price. You break out, you're now on top of all of these moving averages, which typically, when you're on top of all these moving averages, what are they going to act as?
Support, catalyst.
They're going to act as support. They're going to act as support. So you get the double bottom, you get the double top. It's not very clean, but that's what you get. And then you get the breakout. Now you might say on the weekly chart that, or coming into a Thursday afternoon in the East, might be a little overextended. But who's looking at Apple for next week?
I am. I like the reversal
Institutions?
characteristics. I think that there is an institutional move into these companies.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. And I think that's the key point, is the institutional flow here. And so I do think you're getting some legitimate price movement coming into these stocks, like we were talking about Microsoft. Do we see these gains this week on the breakout? Do we see the market just puking this up next week?
No, I don't think so.
It would, something would have to happen. Like
Okay,
something.
so something would have to happen. All right, let's think about what that something could be. Could it be economically?
The only thing I can think of is if for some year the 10-year like jumped to 1.9 or 1.85 and had this massive jump.
But even a massive jump right now, in the last 2 weeks of that 10-year bond market, it's been 1.7. It's been 1.72.
1.72.
It's been 1.75. And what's the market done?
Kept on chugging.
Kept on buying.
Yep. Playing the little game.
I don't believe that bond market storyline was as big as other people do. I didn't think it was as big when it was happening. And I certainly don't believe it's all of a sudden going to spark the market's fear next week, being like, oh yeah, now we're concerned again about the 10-year note next week. Maybe if you get a radical spike, maybe. But that's a hypothetical. But economic reports next week? There's no economic reports next week that like we got to be that concerned about.
Not that's going to drive the market.
You got core CPI report,
right?
But what's the CPI report going to do?
It's
besides confirm everything that we've seen with the Fed?
Correct.
What's the so we're not going to get any new information from CPI. We do get core retail sales next week, because I'm willing to bet that's a positive economic report. I'm willing to bet most of these reports, Fed manufacturing index next week, positive economic report. We haven't had very many negative economic reports. The economic backdrop right now is about as euphoric as I've ever seen. Name me a time where we've had more euphoric economic reports than in the last 2 months.
Well,
from where we were.
Obviously. No, of course, obviously, and GDP revisions are all upward. Manufacturing reports have all been as strong as they've been in 40 years. I mean, we've been going through these in the huddle, on a regular basis, and here on the halftime show on a regular basis. The economic data has been coming in a very, very good and strong, above expectations and showing growth. So
then COVID data next week. We've had very negative COVID data.
We've had
in
some
the last 2
storylines
weeks.
that 8 months ago would have had a
Would
different
have
reaction.
tanked this market.
Yeah.
And yet, does this market care about it right now?
Nope. Market's focused on the vaccine rollout.
Okay. Is the Fed going to say anything next week? Okay. My point is this. Anything that could stop this momentum is only hypothetical scenarios that we don't know about yet, which exist in every market in every second of every day. And you can't trade based on that. You got to trade based on what you see.
Mhm.
And what you see right now is institutional momentum coming into the into the big cap tech stocks. That's what you have. Institutions don't buy today to sell tomorrow.
That's
Hedge
right.
funds do, traders do, institutions don't. And that's what I think you are seeing a little bit here this week is finally those big time institutions are coming into Apple. They're coming into Microsoft. They're coming into, when you're talking about the safety of the market, they're coming into Amazon. They're coming into Google. They're coming into Facebook. They're coming into these big time areas of the market where everybody wants access to, that nobody worries about these stocks 10 years from now. And like Mark said, I don't know what's going to happen to Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google in the short term, but I don't know anybody, and I mean anybody, that thinks their prices are lower than they are today 5-10 years from now.
That's right.
Like anybody.
Yeah.
So these types of movements in these types of stocks, they just don't get flipped on a dime like an Allen Iverson crossover. That's not how institutions play markets in general. And so, I do see the price performance in a Facebook as significant versus when we see price performance like this in other areas of the market. If you see this in small cap stocks, it does not have that big of an impact on the market. When you see this happen on companies like Apple, a $2 trillion company, Amazon, a $2 trillion company, Google, $1.5 trillion company, when you see this happen with those FANG stocks, and again, we've made fun of Jim Cramer a lot in the halftime report, and quite frankly, he has deserved a lot of that. But what he also deserves is a tremendous amount of credit for labeling FANG in 2013 and the importance that FANG represented to the marketplace for 6 consecutive years, leading this market, maintaining this market, being the lifeblood of this market. Those 6 stocks out there, the importance of those stocks to this market over the last 10 years cannot be understated. They are that important to the market. And when they pick momentum, that momentum usually doesn't just stop after one leg. And yes, anything can happen in the future. We live in a very volatile, uncertain world. But when I see price movement in FANG as we're starting to see, and when I'm seeing Microsoft confirm against an all-time high, and I'm seeing Apple after 5 weeks of consolidation where nobody's even talking about it, wake up and show them who's the big dog on the block, and Amazon, which has not been, nobody has been talking about Amazon in literally 8 months, and then all of a sudden it has in a week the biggest momentum it's had in that last 8 months. Facebook, we talked about literally right here, that snapback bullish retracement fighting against the $300 breakout. You started seeing that honestly here, but confirmation here, third confirmation there. How much more evidence do you need? Now, the question isn't about, for me anyways, the question isn't about whether or not this is waking up the market. I certainly believe it's waking up the market. It's now a matter of technically looking at a Facebook saying, okay, yeah, Facebook's alive, it's well, it's doing fantastic, but you're also range up right now. You're also range up. And so when you're looking at Facebook, for example, you're looking at this short-term trend here, you got a stock going from 255 up to 295, 40 points. You got a stock that goes from 278 up to 315. you're at the top end of its range. And so one of the problems some newer traders are going to have is they're going to wake up to the headlines of what's been happening in big tech this week, and they're going to be like, "Oh man, let's all go jump and chase and jump and chase." Well, guys, the pros bought here, the pros bought here, the pros are selling here. Because the only way to make money on this is to lock in profit, let these moving averages catch up, have Facebook form a high base. And so the only problem I see, and it's a minor problem, it's actually a good thing for us traders that tackle trading, is let's not chase the storyline here. Let's be patient, let these moving averages catch up to Facebook, and then let's see where that tight clean trigger is in a week from now on Facebook. On Apple's a little bit of a different beast. I don't have an overextended, type technical fill. We just broke out of the moving averages here. Yes, you are overextended a little bit here, given the fact that you've ran from 218 and now you're, 118, you're clinging into 130. Yeah, you're a little bit overextended here, but all you're going to need on Apple is a little bit of a hesitation. That's all you would need, because you got more of a Apple could catch up philosophy, whereas Facebook, Google are leading and you got to be patient, wait for high bases. Apple's in a little bit of a catch up mode. Give us just a 1-2 day hesitation, then I do think you can play a little catch up, playing the momentum on Apple. Again, Google, when you're looking at Google, very similar to what you read on Microsoft, you read on Facebook, a little bit overextended, maybe be a little bit patient. That's why I do think you're a little choppy on the breakout. You don't have you're definitely overextended here. Be a little patient, very similar to Facebook. Let those moving averages catch up. Look at that on the weekly chart. You got a really good clean breakout on the weekly chart, little overextended coming into perhaps earnings. Be patient. Let that data kind of smooth out. Let those moving averages catch up to it. When you're looking at, so we've done Facebook, Microsoft. Let's take a look at Netflix. Netflix was one of those original FANG stocks, right? Netflix was there. And Netflix, very similar to Amazon, has fallen out of favor for quite some time. I do think you are a little bit overextended coming into the breakout channels here. You got a couple breakout channels on Netflix you got to concern yourself with. The first one is in this zone between 560 and 566. You are definitely overextended as you come into this very important zone. The difference between Netflix and Apple still has a lot of room to run before it gets into the top end of the zone. Netflix is at the top end of the zone. Given that, you want to really be patient to see Netflix set up here. Maybe similar to a scenario we saw in Best Buy, whereas you were at the top end of the zone, you waited for a little bit of a snapback. Now you're coming straight up back into that breakout channel. And so on Netflix, you're kind of here. Wait for a little bit of this before we look at that breakout on Netflix. But the beautiful thing is FANG is waking up. And FANG has not been awake this year.
Been hibernating.
It's been hibernating a little bit, but they're woken up and they're ready to rock and roll, in my opinion.